Hey folks, Rob here, and I thought I'd come to you today with kind of a little different type of video. I had a viewer um, request a kind of video that I probably wouldn't have thought about doing, simply because of the fact that I've owned guns for years, and since I was a child, I grew up around guns. Everybody in my family owned guns, but uh, the viewer requested maybe I do a video on, you know, uh, what would a first-time gun buyer um, look for when they go to a gun shop to pick up a new firearm, and you know, what are some of the things they should be looking for. And to do this, I want to put it into a couple categories. I mean, um, we don't realize that there are a lot of new people out there who maybe have no experience whatsoever with guns. And I would urge all my fellow gun channels to kind of touch upon this subject because, um, a lot of them especially have a lot more viewers than I and have the potential to impact a lot of new people in the gun world. As gun owners, we just assume that everybody knows everything about what we're talking about. So I would encourage everybody who does firearm videos to make a video similar to this to reach their audience. So to give them some tips on, you know, what possibly to look for, to buy, what their considerations should be. And I know this is going a lot more in depth than what the question was from the viewer. Basically, they wanted to know, uh, what should I look for? What are the things I should look for when going to a gun shop to get a gun? Okay. Uh, so the first category of people we're gonna talk about is the people who are completely new to firearm ownership. They have no experience whatsoever with a firearm. Uh, Never owned a gun, maybe never had a family member that owned a gun, grew up in a family, a household that owned no guns, no experience whatsoever. So this person, and the people are flocking to firearms ownership right now at record rates because I think people are fearful of what may come down the road in our country. Um, there may come a day and time when you might call for help and it not show up. So I think a lot of people are starting to think about their, taking responsibility for their own safety and the safety of their families. And that's a great thing. The more people who own guns, uh, the better they understand the people like us who have owned guns for years. And, it helps strengthen our Second Amendment by everybody exercising their right. Now, I realize I'm rambling and I don't want to make this video for super long, but we're going to talk about the first people on the list, and that's people who completely have no experience with firearms. And in my opinion, if you are looking for a handgun, then you should probably pick up something like this revolver. Now, this is a Rock Island. It's a cheap revolver. This sold, I think I give $230 for this at Rural Key, brand new. So, you can buy inexpensive, or you could go with a Smith & Wesson or a Ruger. There are tons of revolvers out there on the new and used market. Um, this is a single action, double action revolver. And what I mean by double action is that the trigger performs two functions. And this gun is unloaded. As you can see, it is unloaded. There are no rounds in the chamber. So this gun, the trigger performs two functions. So when you pull the trigger, when the hammer's down and you pull back on the trigger acts to cock the hammer, which is action 1 and release the trigger from the sear, which is the second action. So the first action is cocking the gun, the second action is firing the gun. This gun is also capable of firing in single action. So what that means is you manually cock the hammer. So now you don't have to pull the trigger back in order to cock the hammer. It's already pre-cocked. So now the trigger only performs one function, and that is to release the hammer from its sear position so that it might drop. And in this position, you have a long, heavy trigger pull. And in this position, as you can see, the trigger pull is short and it's a lot lighter. Now, for a new individual who has no experience with a firearm, I would suggest you start learning by using this revolver in double action. In other words, learning to control your trigger and your hammer and fire it that way. And because let's face it, most people who are out there buying the firearms right now, in a perfect world, you would buy this firearm if you had no experience, and you would go to a class or some kind of training in order to become proficient and understand this firearm, its limitations, its liabilities, its function, safety. You would take the time and invest in the education to inform yourself on the proper use of this. But let's face it, we live in the real world, and 90% of the people, maybe even a higher percentage than that, who go out and buy a new firearm do not receive any type of training whatsoever. So for a complete novice, in my opinion, this is probably your best option. And in a minute, we'll put them on the table in a few minutes, and we'll look at what are some of the things you should look for when purchasing this gun. And the difference in purchasing it new and used, there are some differences that you should look for when purchasing, because most reputable manufacturers, from the factory, the guns, they should be functionally, and you shouldn't have an issue. That's not to say you can't, but a new gun will be covered by a warranty. If you're looking at a used revolver, there's more things that you need to look at, and we may even touch upon that in a second video, what to look for when purchasing a used firearm, revolver or semi-automatic. So I would suggest this for, now if you were going to conceal carry, you would want to lean towards a smaller revolver. And that's another consideration you need to ask yourself when you're buying that first firearm. Am I buying this firearm for concealed carry, to keep in the car? Am I going to strictly be a firearm that I keep at home in the nightstand? If that's the case, you would want a small revolver if you're going to carry it. Something smaller, which makes it more difficult to shoot, but it's more concealable. Now, if it's going to be a truck gun or a gun you keep in your nightstand, and size consideration is not quite so much. Maybe a 4-inch barrel revolver with a more full-size grip is going to be easier to shoot. It's going to be more accurate. So, kind of depends on what your use for the firearm is. And another good option, if you're not looking toward a handgun for home defense, is a shotgun. And I would suggest a 20 gauge pump action shotgun, simply because a lot of people are a little sensitive to the recoil of a 12 gauge. I know as I get older, I don't like the recoil of a 12 gauge. I would get a 20 gauge reputable shotgun, load it up with some buckshot, and inside a home, apartment, very effective. at close range. Devastating. Does have some limitations, but a shotgun is always a good choice if you know you don't want to own a handgun. So the next class of guns would be a semi-automatic. Now, this is a small concealable semi-automatic. This is an XDS Mod 2, and the operation of one of these and a revolver are completely different. You need to invest a little more time in learning the operation of a semi-automatic handgun, because a lot of these handguns, there are no safeties. The safety is here on the trigger, and this gun is unloaded. There's no rounds in it. The magazine is empty, so this gun is unloaded. But typically these guns have no safety, so you're carrying a gun basically with no safety other than your finger. Now this little dingus on the trigger, when you depress that, it does allow the trigger to move to the back. That is your safety. And on a gun such as a Glock or a M&P, that is your only safety. The XD also has the addition of the grip safety here. And if I were a new shooter, a lot of people do not like the grip safeties on the XDs. They think it's redundant. A lot of people think they are high-speed, low-drag operators, that this is going to be a liability to them. I've owned several of these guns, and I've never had an issue with that. And if you're a novice to semi-automatics, probably more safeties are better. It just gives you a little extra security. Now, a semi-automatic will load through the magazine. Some of the considerations you got to take into account is, if you have a weak hand strength, you sometimes can have a little issue loading magazines. You have to rack the slide back. Again, if you're compromised in your hand strength, it takes quite a bit of force to pull that slide back. So there again, would be a revolver would be a better option for you. This gun requires a little bit more firearms knowledge, in my opinion, to safely handle and operate. Whereas with the revolver, you would purposely have to pull that long, hard trigger to the rear in order to fire the gun. Where this has a much shorter, it's a single action, so this trigger performs one action, and that is releasing this one has a grip safety, which, see, there's an added safety. I have to depress that. But this trigger has a single function of releasing the striker. This would be considered a single action striker fired pistol. And what you would look for in a used pistol like this and a new one, like I said, if you're buying new, the likelihood that you would have an issue with it are rare. But we'll go over in a follow-up video on what you would look for in one of these. And these do carry easy. They're a little easier to carry. They're typically lighter, although you can get some lightweight revolvers, but these will have a little less recoil. And if you're willing to take the time, then a semi-automatic is a good option. Now this would be considered a carry size. My personal gun that I carry is this right here. And this is the Ruger LCP2 Light Strike 22. This is a semi-automatic handgun, same as that one. This one has the same little trigger safety on it, but this one has the addition of a thumb safety up here. So this one gives you a little more added security it comes to carrying it. And this gun is unloaded. Now this gun is very lightweight, almost no recoil, a very pleasurable gun to shoot. This is probably one of my all-time favorite little guns. This would be good for pocket carry. That's the way I carry this gun, in my pocket. So if you're looking for a concealed weapon, the little Ruger in 22 long rifle, you know, this is a gun you can afford to practice with. You can take some time. You can learn to shoot it. It has the additional safety. This would be a good option to get you started into a semi-automatic handgun. But I would highly recommend this gun to a new shooter. Very concealable. A lot of people will argue that 22 is not sufficient for self-defense. I've never went out of my house and felt undergunned by carrying this. Our role as civilians, as people, citizens, our role is not the same as the police. You know, our role in carrying a firearm is to get us enough time to get ourselves out of a situation. Whereas police officers and military, their job is to go into the danger. Ours is to get out of the danger. So a 22, in a lot of cases, in most cases, is going to give you that little bit of time you need to get you out of a situation. You know, if you're in a shopping mall and you hear shots in the distance, you do not take this gun and run toward the shots. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't stop something if you have the ability to stop it, but it's not your role to charge in on a situation, guns ablazing, with something like this. This is if you get cornered and someone's coming at you and you have no other option, this is to make them think for a second, to give you enough time that, hey, somebody's shooting at me, and they're not going to care whether it's a 22 or a 9mm. When you're shooting back at them, you know, it kind of changes the tune. So this is to buy you time. That's another thing new shooters need to understand, that, you know, we're not police officers, we're not military. Your gun is to get you out of whatever situation you're in as quickly and safely as possible. Now, if you move on up, now this is a 1911. This is a full-size metal frame gun. This one happens to be a 9mm. It's a Kimber. But this gun would be more well-suited for home defense, although some people would argue it's probably not the best. But I'm just using this as an example. This is a larger gun. It would be easier to shoot. My gun I keep here at home is the Beretta Apx. It does have the rail on it with a weapon light, so a larger full-size gun is my choice for a home defense gun. That's what I use, the Beretta Apx. So, if you're willing to take the time and invest the time to learn the proper use of a semi-automatic, I think that's probably your best option. If you have some experience with firearms in the past, you're familiar with their operation, you know, ask yourself, what am I going to use this gun for? And, you know, what is its intended purpose? Am I buying it for home defense, for concealed carry, personal defense, target practicing, you know, hunting? You know, every one of those will dictate the type of gun you need to be considering for your first purchase. So anyway, guys, I thought this was a topic that had been brought up to me that maybe will incite some thought into somebody who's new to the shooting and firearms ownership, and give them a little guidance Although my opinion's just my opinion, and you know what they say about opinions, they're like assholes, everybody's got one. But, you know, go to a gun shop, pick up the guns, you know, hold them in your hand, compare them, you know, ask questions. You know, I know a lot of gun shops are terrible about customer service. They're kind of like people like me who own guns all their life. We just automatically assume that everybody knows about guns. And a lot of gun shops I go into, they're impatient with their customers because uh, they don't want to take the time to explain things to somebody who may not have any understanding whatsoever. Uh, and so I find some gun shops are probably disenfranchise as many new gun owners as they actually help. So, uh, luckily, where I go, the local gun and pawn I frequent are wonderful people. They will answer any questions. They will help you in any way, you know, regardless of your skill level. They're willing to, you know, talk to you about your needs and what you want. And when it all boils down to it, it's what you need it for and what you want it for. So anyway, I don't know if this will help any new person whatsoever, but I hope it does because that is the reason I make YouTube videos is to help people um, with information. I mean, YouTube is one of the greatest information sharing platforms that has ever been created. It's where people with knowledge can share that with people who are seeking that knowledge. And to me, that's a wonderful thing. So, anyway, guys, um, like the video, comment on it. If you're new to gun ownership and you have questions, you know, shoot them to me. I'll be glad to answer any questions that I can help anybody with. And until the next video, guys, I appreciate you watching, and we'll see you on the next one. Thank you.